Have you ever walked away from an argument and thought, why did I just react like that? That isn't even me. Maybe you became defensive. Maybe you completely shut down. Maybe you walked away before the conversation was even over. And maybe you lashed out and you were ugly and you were mean and you said something you really regretted. Or maybe you apologized just to make the conflict stop, even though you really didn't believe that you'd done anything wrong. Here's what I want you to know. Conflict doesn't always reveal who you are. It often reveals who your nervous system believes it has to become to keep you safe. And once you understand that, you'll stop asking, what's wrong with me? Instead, you'll start asking a much better question. What is my nervous system trying to protect me from? That question changes everything. One of the things I hear almost every week in my therapy office is, Jenn, I don't know what happens to me. I love my partner, but the moment we get into conflict, it is like I become somebody I don't even recognize, and I certainly don't like. And almost everyone says some version of that, some version of that story. That's not who I want to be, And I always tell them the same thing. That may not be the truest version of you. It may simply be the most protected version of you. I'm Jenn Pinkerton, and I'm a psychotherapist and a connection expert. And every week, I try to help people better understand the psychology behind how you show up in relationships so that people can stop surviving in them and start thriving in them. So if you're new here, welcome. Now, before I jump in, I want to tell you about a free resource that I created that I think that will really help you. It's called the Pinkerton Relational Health Index. And this is a free quiz called the PRHI, basically. Most people have no idea where their relationship is actually healthy and where it is quietly struggling. They just know that something feels off or they feel stuck, but they can't really put words to it. My PRHI is designed to help you identify the strengths in your relationship, uncover areas that may need some attention and some help, and to better understand the patterns that are shaping the way you connect with your partner. It also gives you practical insight into where to focus your energy, even if you're dating or single, so that you can build a stronger, healthier relationship. If you haven't taken it yet, you'll find the link in the description below. It's completely free. And I think that you'll be surprised by what it actually reveals for you. Now, let's make sense of something almost every one of us has experienced. Are you ready? Because before I talk about what happens during conflict, I want you to think about the last disagreement that you had with someone that you care about, someone you love. Maybe your partner looked at you and said something as simple as, "Can we talk?" Or, "I felt hurt by what happened yesterday." Or maybe they said, "I don't feel heard." Nothing dramatic happened. Nobody was yelling. Nobody was threatening to leave. And yet something changed inside of you almost instantly. Maybe your heart started racing. Your chest felt tight. Your breathing became shallow. Your jaw was clenched. Maybe you're clenching your fist. And you stopped listening because you were already thinking about how you were going to defend yourself, what you were going to say. Or maybe your mind went completely blank. Have you ever noticed any of this? It's almost as if your body reacts before you've even had time to think. And that's because it does. One of the most important things I want you to understand is this. Your brain's first job is not connection. It's protection. Long before you're thinking about solving the problem, your nervous system is actually trying to answer one question, and this is all the time. Am I safe? It's not asking, am I loved, or who's right, or how do I fix this? It's simply wondering, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And what's fascinating is your nervous system is answering that question before you were even consciously aware that it's happening. Dr. Stephen Porges, through polyvagal theory, calls this neuroception. And this is your nervous system's ability to constantly scan for cues of safety or danger without you having to think about it. So think about that for a minute. Your body is making decisions before your mind catches up. And that's why two people can hear the exact same sentence and have completely different reactions. So one person hears, "Can we talk?" and thinks, "Sure." The other hears those exact same words and immediately feels anxious. They think, "I'm in trouble," or "they're going to leave," or "this is over," or "they're going to say that same crap they said last time," or "I'm going to be criticized." Same words, different nervous system. Because your nervous system doesn't respond to just what's happening. It responds to what it believes is happening. And that's a huge difference. That distinction changes everything. Your nervous system reacts to perceived threat, not just actual threat. And that is why conflict can feel so overwhelming. Your partner may simply be trying to express a hurt feeling. But your nervous system, it may interpret this as rejection or abandonment or failure or not being enough, maybe losing connection. That's why I often tell my clients, your partner isn't always triggering your present. Sometimes they're activating your past. And maybe growing up, you learned that conflict actually meant somebody was going to yell and scream and lash out. Maybe criticism meant love was about to be withdrawn. And maybe expressing emotions wasn't safe for you. Maybe you learned that keeping the peace was the only way to stay connected in your family system. And your adult brain knows that you're sitting in your living room having a conversation with your spouse or your partner, but your nervous system may still be responding to a familiar feeling from a lesson that it learned decades ago before you ever met this partner. And that's why I want to introduce a phrase to you that I hope you're going to remember long after this video ends. Protection before connection. And when your nervous system believes that you're under threat, it's going to always choose protection before connection. Every time, no matter what, no matter who, no matter where. One more time, protection before connection. And it doesn't matter how much you love your partner. It doesn't matter how important they are to you. It doesn't matter how committed you are to your marriage. And by the way, this applies with your children, with your best friend, with your mother, etc. Because if your system believes you're in danger, it's going to protect you first every time. Connection will always become secondary. And that's why good people sometimes become defensive. That's why loving people sometimes completely shut down. And that's why caring people sometimes walk away. That's why kind people sometimes lash out. It's not because anyone's bad or they're bad people. It's because their nervous system has decided that staying emotionally safe is way more important than actually staying emotionally connected. And here is the beautiful part in this. Once you understand that, you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" And instead, you're going to start asking, "What is my nervous system trying to protect me from? And what can I do about it?" Those questions create compassion. It creates self-awareness, and it opens the door to change. Because you can't change what you don't understand, right? We have to understand the why to transform. So now let's talk about the 4 primary ways that our nervous system tries to protect us when it believes we're under threat. I have a feeling you're going to recognize yourself in at least one of them. I do. So if you've made it this far, you may be thinking, okay, all right, fine, Jen. I understand that my nervous system is trying to protect me. But what exactly does that protection look like? Now, this is where I think so many people experience their aha moment, their epiphany. And when psychotherapists or psychologists talk about the 4 primary trauma or survival responses, we refer to them as fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And I want you to hear something important before we talk about each one. Because these are not personality traits. They're not a type of person. They're not labels. And they're sure not excuses for unhealthy behavior. There's simply 4 different ways our nervous system has learned to protect us when it perceives or thinks there is a threat. And here's what I want you to notice. Whether your nervous system chooses to fight or flee, freeze or fawn, and fawn is people-pleasing if you don't know what that word means, it's always trying to accomplish the same thing. Safety. Safety every time. And remember what we talked about earlier? Protection before connection. Your nervous system is going to always choose protection before connection. And this will happen until it learns that connection is safe. So let's see if you recognize yourself in one of these. Maybe your nervous system tries to protect you by fighting, and you are ready to go at all times. You know, when people say fight, they think screaming or explosive or anger. You're lit up. But sometimes, you know, it does look like that. But what if it doesn't? Maybe your partner says they're hurt by something that you did. And before they've even finished speaking and talking and sharing, you're already explaining yourself. You were fighting to be heard. You interrupt, you defend. You're doing the DDDEP, defend, deny, deflect, explain, improve. You're starting to prove your point. You feel this overwhelming need for them to understand that you didn't mean it that way. You know, maybe your voice gets louder. Maybe you become sarcastic. Maybe you criticize them back. And maybe you bring up something they did 3 weeks ago because suddenly it feels like you're the one on trial. And later, after you've calmed down, you think, why couldn't I just listen? Now, if that's you, your nervous system wasn't necessarily trying to win an argument. It was trying to survive what it perceived as a threat. And the fight response often shows up that way. Defensiveness, criticism, blame, contempt, control, explaining, interrupting, raising your voice, lashing out, angry as hell, needing the last word. And underneath all of those behaviors is one central message. I don't feel emotionally safe right now. And that's why I tell my clients, people who become defensive aren't always protecting their ego. Sometimes they're just protecting a wound. Now, maybe that wasn't you at all. Maybe when I shared all that, it didn't sound right to you. Maybe your nervous system protects you through flight. For you, conflict feels overwhelming. You don't want to yell. You just don't want to argue. You just want out. You want it to stop. Or maybe you yelled first and now you want it to stop. And suddenly you need to answer emails. You need to check your phone. You've got to go walk the dog, clean the gym, clean the kitchen, scroll, go to your phone, go to bed. Maybe you tell yourself, we'll just talk about this later. I can't do this right now. Forget it. Just forget it. And from the outside, it may look like you don't care. But that's usually not what's happening here. Many people who have a flight response, they care deeply, but they feel overwhelmed. They feel emotionally flooded. And distance becomes the fastest way their nervous system knows how to create that necessary relief. So the flight response often looks like leaving the room, avoiding a difficult conversation, working excessively, keeping yourself busy, being on your phone, emotional withdrawal, escaping, watching TV, binging out, numbing, changing the subject, physically leaving the house. And it's not always about avoiding your partner, avoiding your feelings. Sometimes it's just about escaping what your body believes it cannot tolerate. And avoidance isn't always about not caring. Sometimes it's about caring so unbelievably much that your nervous system believes that distance is the safest option. Or neither maybe of these describes you. Maybe instead protection for you looks like freeze. And this one breaks my heart because people are often so misunderstood about this. Because maybe your partner says, talk to me, and you want to, you really do, but your mind goes completely blank. You absolutely cannot even think. You can't organize your thoughts, and you're staring at the floor. You feel quiet and numb, and it's almost like your brain has gone offline. And your partner says, say something to me. And inside you're thinking, I'm trying. And this is the freeze response. When we're emotionally flooded, the brain can become less efficient at accessing language, at accessing reasoning and problem solving. And your nervous system has shifted into complete survival mode. And so the freeze response often looks like going silent, brain fog, feeling numb, difficulty finding words, and feeling totally connected from yourself and from your body, looking emotionally flat, staring off into space, feeling completely stuck. And because partners don't understand this response, they often interpret it as not caring. But silence isn't always indifference. Sometimes it's an overwhelmed nervous system with no access to words. And then there's the fourth response, fawn. I see this one every single week when I'm talking to somebody online or in my office. And maybe your first instinct isn't to defend yourself. It's just to smooth everything over. You apologize before you've even processed what's happened to you. You are so ready to make this okay. And you say, you're right, whatever you need, it's okay. You minimize your own feelings. You betray yourself. You over-explain, you overfunction, you fix, you rescue, you accommodate. You make sure everybody else is okay while quietly abandoning yourself. And somewhere along the way, your nervous system learned that keeping other people comfortable was the safest way to stay connected. The fawn response often looks like people-pleasing. Obviously, that's the biggest word for this, which looks like over-apologizing, difficulty saying no, avoiding conflict, losing your voice, prioritizing everyone's needs ahead of yours, taking responsibility for other people's emotions, and you're constantly trying to keep the peace. And while people often praise these behaviors, they can come at a very enormous personal cost. Because if your safety depends on everybody else and everyone else being okay, then you rarely get to be okay yourself. People-pleasing isn't always kindness. Sometimes it is full-on survival strategy. Now, here's what I hope you're beginning to see. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, different behaviors, same purpose, protection. And every one of these responses is your nervous system trying to answer that same one question. How do I get through this without getting hurt? I need to feel safe, which means conflict doesn't create the worst version of you. It often reveals the version of you that your nervous system believes will keep you safe. So pause there for a second. Because once you understand that, something can shift. You're going to stop seeing yourself as too emotional, too much. You're going to stop labeling yourself as bad at relationships. You're going to stop asking, what is wrong with me? Why do I lash out and hurt everybody I love? And you're going to become curious instead. What is my body trying to tell me? What feels threatening right now? What old story just got activated for me? And that curiosity is where emotional maturity begins. Not because you've stopped becoming dysregulated, but because you've started recognizing it. And recognition and recognizing that is what gives you the opportunity to do something different. Because awareness without action changes nothing. And that's where sometimes people intellectualize things and nothing changes. So this brings us to the next question. How do you know when you become emotionally flooded? How do you know when you're activated? Because if you don't recognize that flooding while it's happening, you're never going to have the opportunity to interrupt it, to stop it. And that's where I want to go next. So how do you know when you become emotionally flooded? This may be one of the most important relationship skills you'll ever develop. Because here's what I know. Most couples don't recognize they're dysregulated or flooded or activated until they've already said something they absolutely regret. And by then, the damage has been done. The message they had, totally lost in the delivery. And the healthiest couples aren't the ones who never get triggered. They're the ones who recognize it sooner. So I want you to think about this for a minute. What is your tell? What does your body do before your behavior changes? And for some people, it's a racing heart. For others, it is tightness in the chest. Maybe your jaw clenches, your shoulders tense up, and your breathing becomes very shallow. Your face feels hot, your stomach drops, you feel sick, your hands get sweaty, you clench your palms. Maybe your thoughts are racing, or maybe they just disappear altogether. Maybe you completely stop listening because you're too busy preparing your response and your defense and your explanation. Maybe you notice an overwhelming urge to escape and flee and run. And maybe suddenly you feel the need to make everybody happy just so the discomfort will end. Those are your tells. And every one of us has a tell, or many of them. The challenge is that most of us spend years paying attention to everyone else's behavior while completely ignoring what our own body is trying to tell us. So I often ask my clients, how do you know your partner is upset? They can answer that immediately. And then I ask, how do you know when you're becoming emotionally flooded? Silence. And that's emotional self-awareness. Learning to recognize your own nervous system before it takes over. Because once you're flooded, your brain changes. The part of your brain responsible for clear thinking and empathy and problem solving and emotional flexibility becomes much less accessible. You don't have less intelligence. You simply have less access to it. And in that moment, that's why trying to solve a relationship problem while emotionally flooded is like trying to perform surgery with oven mitts. Does that visual explain that to you? Because you have the tools, you just can't get to them. And yet this is exactly when most couples try to keep talking. They think if we just stay here long enough and we just iron this out and we fight through it, we're going to figure it out. But usually the opposite happens. The conversation gets louder. It gets more defensive and more hurtful. And both nervous systems become increasingly activated. Nobody feels heard. And nobody feels understood. Nobody feels safe. Which is why I teach something I call the power in the pause. So I want to be really clear. A pause is not avoidance. A pause is not punishment. A pause is not giving your partner the silent treatment or stonewalling. A pause is an intentional decision to create the biological conditions necessary for connection. Remember, protection before connection? So if your nervous system is choosing protection, you are no longer capable of the kind of vulnerability that healthy repair requires. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do in the middle of conflict is to say, I can feel my body getting flooded right now. I want to continue this conversation because you matter to me and I love you, but I know I'm not capable of showing up as the person I want to be. I need just a moment, a little time to regulate. And I promise I'll come back so we can finish this conversation. So do you hear that difference? You're not abandoning the conversation. You're protecting the relationship from a version of yourself that isn't thinking clearly. And that's maturity. Because here's the part I absolutely believe is essential. The person who asked for the pause is responsible for initiating the repair. That is a hard rule. This is so important. If you're the one saying I need 20 minutes or I need an hour or I need 5 minutes, then it is your responsibility to come back. Don't make your partner chase you. Don't make them trigger abandonment wounds. Don't leave them wondering if the conversation is ever going to happen. Don't let the pause become emotional abandonment and strategy. You know, when someone's been left waiting without knowing if you'll return, the pause no longer feels like regulation. It's going to feel like rejection. It's going to feel like being shut out. And healthy pauses have structure. Healthy pauses have intention. Healthy pauses have follow through. You might say, let's take 30 minutes. And I'm going to come find you at 7 o'clock so we can finish this conversation. I'm not going to leave. I just want to go outside in the yard or on the patio. I want to go to my room. And this communicates something incredibly important to your partner. I'm not leaving you. I'm taking care of my nervous system so I can come back and take care of us. And that is emotional maturity. That is not pretending you're okay, not forcing yourself to stay in a conversation when your body has shifted into survival mode, not making a mess of your message because of your delivery. Emotional maturity is recognizing when you're no longer able to communicate effectively, and you're going to take responsibility for regulating yourself like an adult and returning ready to connect. Because here's the truth. You cannot repair any emotional injury while you're trying to survive. Repair requires presence. Repair requires curiosity. You have to lean in. Repair requires empathy. Repair requires vulnerability. And vulnerability cannot exist at all when your nervous system believes it's under attack. I mean, that would be ridiculous, right? So the question becomes, how do we help our nervous system feel safe enough to come back online? How do we move from protection back to connection? And that's where practical regulation becomes one of the most powerful relationship skills you are ever going to develop, not just for your partner, but for your child, for your best friend, for your mother at work, etc. So when people hear regulate your nervous system, they often think it means calm down. And I don't love that phrase, because when somebody says, just calm down, have you ever actually felt calmer? No, you probably get pissed off. Instead, regulation isn't about forcing yourself to stop having feelings and emotions. It's about helping your body recognize that the threat has passed. So remember, your nervous system doesn't respond to logic first. It responds to the physiology, which means if we're going to help your body feel safe again, then we're going to have to work with the body and not against it. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see couples make is trying to think that their way out of a physiological response is going to work. You can't outthink a nervous system that's convinced that you're under attack. The tiger's in the room to your body. And sometimes the fastest way back to connection is to help your body remember that you're safe. So let me share some of my favorite regulation tools. And maybe all of you do this, but have you done it at the right time? And more importantly, why they work. Not every tool works for every person. So part of emotional maturity is to learn what helps your nervous system return to safety. And one of the simplest techniques is changing your breathing. We've all heard of breath work, right? When we're flooded, our breathing naturally becomes faster and shallower. And that's your body's way of preparing for survival. And the problem is that shallow breathing also tells your brain the danger is still here. So one of my favorite techniques is box breathing. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and hold again for 4, and then repeat it. What you're really doing is sending a message to your nervous system that says, we're okay, and you can slow down now. Another technique I also love is something called the physiological sigh. Take one breath in, and then take a second, and then a smaller inhale before exhaling slowly through your mouth. And research has shown that this is one of the fastest ways to decrease that stress because it helps release the trapped carbon dioxide and it signals the nervous system to begin settling. And sometimes we need to interrupt our physiology another way. Cold water can be incredibly effective. Splashing cold water on your face, holding something cold in your hands like ice cubes, or placing a cool compress on your cheeks and your neck activates what's known as the diving reflex. This reflex naturally slows your heart rate and helps shift your body out of a heightened stress response. So if you've never noticed yourself feeling more grounded after washing your face with cold water, now you'll know. This is where go splash your face comes from, right? Movement is another powerful regulator. When we are struggling for survival, hormones and adrenaline are released. And if you simply sit there while all those hormones are circulating in your body stays activated. Sometimes the most productive thing that you can do is to get up, take a walk, stretch, shake out your arms, and shake your legs, walk around the block. Not because you're avoiding the conversation, but because you're helping your body complete the stress response. Another tool I recommend to many clients is tapping. And I personally do this all the time. My own family knows when I am tapping around my orbital bone or around my chest or top of my head. And by rhythmically tapping on specific points of your body while slowing your breathing and staying present, many people find it much easier to reduce that emotional intensity and to reconnect with yourself, with your body. So many individuals report that this helps them feel a lot more grounded. It personally helps me, and it helps you stay emotionally regulated. Some people also regulate through their senses. This is where grounding becomes incredibly helpful. I will often teach clients the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. You look around and you identify near you 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And why does it work? This is because anxiety pulls us into an imagined danger, and grounding brings us back into the present and in that moment. And it reminds the nervous system, I'm here. I'm safe. This moment is different. Music can also be an incredibly regulating thing. Have you ever noticed how one song can completely change your entire mood and your emotional state? That's because music has direct access to areas of the brain involved in emotion and memory and regulation. So sometimes creating a calming playlist before you've ever even been in conflict can become part of your regulation plan. I mean, I personally will go listen to my Kings of Leon and feel better every time because nature becomes your regulator, you know? Also, stepping outside, feeling the sun on your face, standing barefoot in the grass, earthing is so important. Listening to the birds, feeling the wind. When I'm out in the mountains, walking out in nature, I feel so good. And it has a remarkable way of helping our nervous system settle. And here's one that surprises people. Sometimes the greatest regulator isn't even a technique. It's another regulated person. And we call this co-regulation. So think about a time when somebody sat with you during a really difficult moment in your life. They weren't trying to fix you, and they weren't talking you out of your feelings. They simply stayed calm, and their calm helped your body find calm. That's co-regulation. Our nervous systems are constantly communicating with one another, and this is subconscious. This is one of the reasons that emotionally regulated partners become such powerful healers for one another over time. And eventually those repeated experiences of safety become internalized, and co-regulation becomes self-regulation. And that's one of the beautiful goals of a healthy relationship. But I also want to say something really important here. These tools are not designed to help you avoid emotions. They're just designed to help you stay connected while experiencing emotions. Big difference there. Because healing isn't becoming someone who never gets triggered. Healing isn't becoming someone who recognizes the trigger and doesn't do anything about it. It's I want you to recognize it sooner, regulate your body, and then return to the conversation with curiosity instead of protection. Because that's where repair is going to begin. And that's where a healthy relationship becomes built. So I'm really excited about the last part I want to talk about because I don't want to end with just information. I want to leave you with a completely different way of seeing themselves, seeing yourself and your relationship. This ending, I want you to feel really hopeful and empowering. And I want this to naturally lead into you thinking about your attachment. So here's your final thought. Every single one of us has a nervous system. Every single one of us gets triggered. Every single one of us has moments when protection wins over connection. And that doesn't make you less than, doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you too much. It doesn't make you too sensitive or too emotional. It makes you human. And the difference isn't whether you become dysregulated, because everyone does. The difference is what you do next. And emotionally mature people aren't the people who never experience fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. They're the people who recognize those responses happening sooner. And they take responsibility for them. They regulate them. And then they come back and show up and repair. That's what healthy relationships look like. And I think one of the big misconceptions about emotional maturity is that it's about controlling your emotions. And I don't believe that at all. I believe that emotional maturity is about becoming so unbelievably self-aware with who you are that you recognize when your nervous system has taken over before it begins making decisions for you. It's noticing your racing heart. It's noticing your shallow breath. It's noticing the urge to defend yourself, deny, explain, improve, or to shut down, or to walk away, or to be on your phone, or to keep everybody happy while abandoning yourself. And instead of automatically reacting, you pause. You pause because you want to respond. You want to be curious. So you're going to ask yourself, what is my nervous system trying to protect me from right now? And that one question creates all the space. And in that space, you have a choice. You can keep repeating an old survival strategy, or you can choose a new relational response. And that's where healing happens. Not because you never become activated, but because activation no longer gets the final say. And one of the things I tell couples in my office specifically is that relationships don't become healthier because conflict disappears. We want to stay connected in conflict. So they become healthier because your recovery gets shorter. You recognize your triggers faster. You apologize sooner. You take ownership more quickly. You repair more intentionally and rapidly. And then over time, your nervous system begins collecting new data, new evidence. Evidence that conflict doesn't always end in abandonment. Evidence that disagreements don't have to destroy connection. Or maybe evidence that vulnerability will bring you closer instead of pushing people away. And little by little, your body begins to learn something it may have never learned before. It learns, in this relationship, I'm safe. And that's what healing really is. Not erasing your past, not pretending your trauma or wounds never occurred or happened, but creating enough new experiences that your nervous system no longer has to live as the past is still happening. And I want to leave you with something that has become one of the foundational beliefs of my work. Vulnerability is the bridge to connection. And connection is the bridge to fulfilling sex and intimacy, because fulfilling sex is built on foundations of safety and connection. So when your nervous system believes that you're under attack, vulnerability feels impossible. That's why learning to regulate your nervous system isn't just about becoming calmer and to be better in conflict. It's also about making connection possible again. Because connection, not protection, is where healthy relationships thrive. And as a connection expert, this is my belief. This is where I work from. So as you think about all this, what response did you most recognize in yourself? Fight, flight, freeze, fawn, all of them? Let me know in the comments. I read those comments, and your experiences often inspire my future videos that can help everyone. And if this video helped you understand yourself or your relationship in a new way, let me know. And lastly, don't forget to take the free Pinkerton Relational Health Index, the PRHI quiz, using the link in the description. It is one of the best places to begin if you're ready to understand yourself and the patterns shaping your relationship, and maybe take some practical steps towards building a healthier connection. Now, in my next video, we're going to answer the question that changes really everything. Where did all of these protective patterns come from in the first place? And why does one person become defensive while another one shuts down? Why do some people fear abandonment while other people fear vulnerability? The answer isn't found in your current relationship. It's found much, much earlier, before you ever even learned how to love. You actually learned how to survive. And those early experiences become your first blueprint for relationships. These are what I call your primary love lessons, and they shaped your attachment style, your expectations of love, your beliefs about safety, and even the way your nervous system responds during conflict. If you want to understand why your relationship patterns keep repeating and doing the same thing again and again, don't miss that conversation. I'll see you there.